The lights in the studio were too bright for the conversation that was about to unfold. Pam Bondi sat across from Elon Musk at a sleek, glass interview desk designed more for optics than intimacy. The network had cleared the usual format. No panelists, no sound bites, just the two of them. 30 uninterrupted minutes. Live. It was a rare alignment of opportunity and tension. Pam Bondi had built her career pressing the hard line. Law and order, public accountability, direct language. She had grilled prosecutors, executives, even politicians on live television and never blinked. She wasn't here for drama. She was here for answers. Elon Musk hadn't blinked much either. He was calm, present, dressed down in a dark sweater and jacket, looking more like a TED Talk speaker than a CEO under scrutiny. His expression was unreadable. He didn't check his phone, didn't smirk. He just waited. Pam didn't ease in. From the first question, she struck. Mr. Musk, you have more access to private infrastructure, AI tools, and global communications systems than most sovereign governments. At what point does innovation become unchecked influence? Elon's eyes narrowed slightly, not in defensiveness, but as if studying the question like a new piece of hardware. He answered without flinching. When the people asking that question stop building and start regulating out of fear. Pam smiled, tight and cold. That sounds like the answer of someone who's never been held accountable by anything other than a quarterly earnings report. Elon tilted his head. That's because most accountability is reactive. I build preemptively. Pam leaned in slightly. You build with enormous consequences. You disrupt markets. You destabilize industries. You bypass labor protections. You even name satellites after sci-fi novels. Where's the humility in that? Elon didn't look away. You don't stop a meteor by humbling yourself in its shadow. Pam raised a brow. Interesting metaphor, especially coming from someone who once said on Twitter that laws slow down genius. There it was. The room shifted. Elon didn't retreat. He leaned in. And I meant it. If Da Vinci had to fill out grant forms, he would have died drawing schematics for buildings no one let him build. Pam's voice didn't rise. It got lower, sharper. You're not Da Vinci. That landed. The room didn't breathe. And Elon Musk, for a moment, looked like he'd been hit with a voltage he hadn't expected. But he didn't break. He said, "No, I'm not. But I didn't ask for that comparison. You just gave it to me." Pam leaned back slightly. Score one to him. But she wasn't done. Let's talk about people, she said. The ones on the factory floors. The moderators flagging violent content. The laid-off engineers. The children inhaling lithium dust in mines across the ocean so you can sell cleaner cars. Are they part of your vision? Or just the cost of it? Elon paused. Not long. Just enough. Enough for the silence to hurt more than any excuse would have. Then he said, the future is heavy. Someone always carries it first. Pam stared. So they carry it for you? No, he said. They carry it for the world. I just built the bag. That was when the studio got quiet in a different way. Not with tension, with discomfort. Because Elon Musk wasn't hiding behind charm. He wasn't spinning PR. He was saying the brutal thing most people in his position wrapped in softer words. And somehow, that honesty, even if it was chilling, stunned the room more than denial would have. Pam didn't look shaken, but she didn't pivot either. She said, so if someone dies mining cobalt for one of your batteries, and a child breathes cleaner air in LA because of your car, you call that a balance? Elon's voice dropped. I call that history. Pam held his gaze. No remorse. Elon replied, remorse is for accidents. This is design. There it was. The sentence that would ricochet around the internet in hours. That would be quoted and condemned and debated and misunderstood. Remorse is for accidents. This is design. Pam didn't jump on it. She let it sit. Because she understood something most interviewers didn't. When someone gives you their deepest belief without knowing how it will be received, the most powerful thing you can do is let them hear it echo back in the room. In the control room, no one spoke. The director's hand hovered over the go to break button for a full minute before letting it drop again. Let it run. This wasn't a segment anymore. This was something else. Something that couldn't be recut or rewritten. On set, Pam finally moved forward again. You believe you're shaping the future, she said. But do you ever stop to ask if the future wants to be shaped by you? Elon answered, and it wasn't defensive. No, he said, because the future doesn't vote. Pam nodded slowly. Then who does? Elon looked into the camera, not directly, but just enough. Whoever builds it first. And that was the moment the room exhaled. Not because it was over, but because everyone watching, in the studio, behind the cameras, at home on their screens, finally understood what this really was. Not a clash of personalities. A philosophical standoff. Between progress and principle. Between speed and consequence. Between the man who builds the system and the woman asking who pays for it. The silence that followed Elon's final answer wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. Pam Bondi let it hold. She knew how to sit inside tension without flinching. In courtrooms, in depositions, on air, her strength wasn't in volume. It was in gravity, in knowing when not to interrupt the truth, even when it was hard to hear. She tapped her pen once on the table. Quiet. Steady. Then she said, I've heard that same argument from defense contractors, from big tobacco executives, from oil CEOs, that building the future is worth casualties. What makes you different? Elon shifted in his chair, not uncomfortably, but like someone who'd finally been asked the exact question they'd spent years hoping no one would. I don't hide it, he said. Pam didn't move. He continued, I tell people what the future costs. I don't pretend every breakthrough is painless. I don't wrap it in slogans about sustainability or prosperity for all. I tell the truth. That's the difference. Pam leaned forward just slightly, voice controlled. No. The difference is, you made people fall in love with it first. That line hit harder than anything before. Because it was true. Elon Musk hadn't sold cars. He had sold redemption. He had made people believe that progress didn't have to feel like sacrifice. That innovation could be heroic. That the smartest man in the room could also be the savior. Pam went on. You gave people hope. You promised a cleaner world. You spoke in futures, but you built in shortcuts. The people mining your batteries don't get TED Talks, Mr. Musk. They get lung disease. Elon's jaw clenched. He didn't argue. He didn't deny. He just said, you're not wrong. Pam's voice dropped. But you're not stopping. Elon looked at her, unblinking. No, I'm not. And then he said it. The sentence that felt like a quiet blow to the heart of the room. Because slowing down doesn't unmake the past. It just delays the future. Pam sat back. There it was. The brutal response. Not shouted. Not dramatic. Cold. Calculated. Convicted. A declaration not of arrogance, but of moral surrender. He wasn't claiming to be right. He was claiming to be necessary. And somehow, that made it worse. Pam asked the next question almost in a whisper. So you'd rather be remembered as the one who broke it all and built something new, than the one who tried to fix what we already had? Elon paused, then said, we already tried fixing it. Look where that got us. Pam didn't respond immediately. She just stared at him. Then, slowly, she closed her notebook. Not as a signal of defeat, but as something else. A reckoning. Because what do you do when someone admits the damage, embraces the consequence, and still doesn't stop? You stop pretending you're here to change their mind. You start showing people what that mind is made of. Backstage, producers watched in stunned silence. No commercials had cut in. No cue cards were followed. This wasn't a show anymore. It was something heavier. A man unraveling his philosophy live on camera and not apologizing for it. A woman pressing without shouting and refusing to let performance win the room. Pam turned to Elon once more. Her voice clear now. Certain. Do you believe the ends justify the means? Elon thought about it. Longer than before. And then, slowly. No. But I believe the future doesn't wait for perfect means. Pam nodded. Then she said, that's the most honest answer I've ever heard from someone in your position. He didn't thank her. He didn't smile. He just said, most people don't want honesty. They want hope. I don't sell hope anymore. Pam looked down at her notes. Then back at him. You should have stopped selling it the moment you realized you couldn't deliver it without burying someone else. And for the first time that night, Elon Musk didn't have a response. Not because he was defeated. Because something in that line cut deeper than accusation. It was the thing he had always feared might be true. that the legacy he was building would outpace the lives it left behind. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Pam Bondi sat perfectly still, her eyes steady, her notes untouched. Elon Musk had turned slightly in his chair, facing more toward her than the camera now. The air between them was no longer tense. It was thick, heavy with the cost of honesty spoken without apology. Finally, Pam broke the silence. Quietly, "What do you think they'll say about you in 50 years? Elon looked away, not in avoidance, in calculation. "I think they'll say I moved too fast." Pam waited. "And will they say you were right?" Elon's voice came slowly. "I don't think right will matter. I think the world will be too busy living with what I left behind." Pam leaned in, her voice low, almost tired now. "That's not an answer. That's abdication." Elon looked up. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only answer you get when the clock's already ticking." She didn't flinch. "You chose the ticking." Elon's mouth tightened, but he didn't defend himself. Instead, he said, "Every generation has someone who's willing to be the villain if it means breaking the pattern. Maybe that's me." Pam shook her head, not in disagreement, in something closer to disappointment. "You keep calling it a pattern," she said. "But patterns don't leave kids choking in cobalt mines. People do." That landed hard, and Elon didn't interrupt the silence that followed it. He just sat in it. Like maybe, for the first time in a very long time, he understood that not every calculation fits into a slide deck. Pam pressed once more. "What would you do differently if you didn't have billions of dollars to cushion the fallout?" Elon answered instantly. "I wouldn't stop." Pam blinked, not because she was shocked, because she believed him. He continued, "I don't build because I'm rich. I'm rich because I never stopped building." Pam asked the question that changed everything. "Do you build to solve something or to survive something?" Elon looked right at her. The room seemed to narrow. "And finally, after everything," he said, "I build so I don't have to sit still long enough to feel what I destroyed." There it was. The real brutal response. Not to her. To himself. The thing no headline would quote. The thing no market analyst would understand. Not anger. Not arrogance. Fear. Pam sat back in her chair. She didn't gloat. She didn't declare victory. Because it wasn't a win. It was a wound. Exposed in public, and neither of them looked away from it. The control room was silent. One producer whispered, "We're not airing a debate. We're airing a reckoning." And no one disagreed. Back on set, Pam looked across the table at the man the world had praised and blamed and built into a myth. She didn't ask another question. She said something else. Something no one expected. "I think you could still do it differently." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Too late for redemption arcs." Pam smiled faintly. "I didn't say redemption. I said differently. You can't erase what you've done, but you don't have to keep repeating it." Elon looked down at the table. He didn't nod, but he didn't reject it either. And for the first time, there was no rebuttal. No counter. Just quiet. Something shifting. Not in the argument. In the man himself. The segment was technically over. The countdown in the control room had run out. The time block had expired. The producers were supposed to cut to commercial or roll into the closing segment. But no one moved. Pam Bondi didn't glance at the clock. Elon Musk didn't check his phone. They just sat there. Two people in the wreckage of a conversation that had dropped its script, lost its shape, and become something real. Pam broke the stillness first. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. Not to bait. Not to trap. Just to know. Elon didn't deflect. "I regret thinking results were proof." Pam said nothing. Elon continued, slower now. "I thought building something that worked meant the means didn't matter. I thought disruption was virtue." He looked up. "I still believe in disruption. But I see now what I disrupted wasn't just the system. It was the people inside it." Pam nodded. It wasn't approval. It was acknowledgement. "That's the cost of moving fast," she said. Elon finished the thought. "And breaking things." They sat again in silence. Then Pam asked, "And what about the next thing you build?" Elon looked straight at her. And what he said didn't sound like a soundbite. It sounded like a man trying to find a sentence that could hold the weight of where he had been. "I think the next thing I build has to be something I don't walk away from." Pam tilted her head, measuring him. "You've walked away from a lot." "I know." "Why?" Elon hesitated, then said, Because failure felt more tolerable than stillness. That was the truth. The one he hadn't planned to say. The one that made even the camera operators stop breathing for a second. Pam's voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. Then maybe stillness is exactly what the world needs from you now. Elon nodded, slowly. I've been building to outrun the fire. Maybe it's time I learned how to stand in the smoke. And then, for the first time in the entire segment, Pam leaned back. Not to retreat, to rest. Because something had finally settled between them. Not agreement, not peace, but truth. And it was enough. Outside the studio, a crowd had gathered. Not a protest, not fans, just people, waiting, not for a photo or a statement, just to see what happened when the smartest man in the room stopped pretending answers were the same as wisdom. When the woman asking the questions didn't want to win. She wanted to understand what was underneath the man the world had never told no. When Elon Musk stepped out of the building an hour later, he didn't speak to the press. He didn't smirk. He didn't deflect. He just looked out at the crowd and nodded, quietly, as if to say, I heard her, and I'm still thinking about it. The clip aired without edits. No commentary. No headline graphics. Just the full exchange, from the first question to the moment Elon Musk stepped off set. Not defeated, not exalted, just different. The network didn't expect what came next. Viewers didn't flood the internet with applause or outrage. They didn't divide into sides. They watched. And then, quietly, they began sharing pieces of the conversation, not the most dramatic moments, but the hardest ones. The silences. The sentences that hurt more than they impressed. Remorse is for accidents. This is design. I build so I don't have to feel what I destroyed. Maybe stillness is exactly what the world needs from you now. People didn't repost them with emojis or hot takes. They posted them with questions. What happens when the man building the future finally stops to look back? What do we do with ambition that tells the truth and keeps going anyway? Pam Bondi didn't gloat. She didn't make the rounds. She gave one interview to a local station in Florida. The anchor asked if she thought Elon had finally been humbled. Pam shook her head. I wasn't trying to humble him, she said. I was trying to see if he still remembered what it feels like to answer to someone. She paused. I think he did. At Tesla headquarters, the ripple took a different shape. People talked differently in meetings. Some executives, quietly, started revisiting projects that had been shelved for being too ethically complicated. One senior engineer brought up the interview during a product strategy call. He didn't reference a quote. He just said, we need to stop pretending human cost is an externality. No one pushed back. That had never happened before. Elon Musk didn't address the interview publicly. He didn't post. He didn't clarify. But something shifted in him that his closest advisors noticed almost immediately. He stayed in meetings longer. He asked questions differently. When an analyst tried to rush through a financial model that would automate 1,200 jobs, Elon interrupted, not to oppose it, but to ask one thing. What happens to them? And when the room fell quiet, he waited. Not for a number, for a real answer. One night, weeks after the interview, he sent an email to one of his senior leads. Short, no subject line. Let's revisit the project we shelved last year. The one that gave workers more time off. I want to see if we can build it without losing edge. No explanation. But the lead saved the email in a private folder titled, Smoke, Not Fire. Because people were starting to understand that something inside the man had bent. Not broken, just bent, toward something slower, heavier, more human. Pam Bondi returned to her regular work. But wherever she went, people asked her about that night. Not with admiration, with curiosity. What had changed? She never gave them the simple answer. She just said, he stayed. They always asked what she meant. She'd reply, he could have walked when it got hard. But he stayed long enough to hear himself. That was the win. Not the one she took. The one he gave himself. Months passed. The moment faded from headlines. New conflicts rose. New faces filled the airwaves. New tech launches and political storms took their turn. But every so often, when someone talked about accountability, about ambition, about cost, the clip would resurface. Quietly, without fanfare. not as a spectacle, as a reference. The night when someone powerful sat down, was challenged, and didn't run. Pam Bondi never revisited the conversation on air. She didn't build a brand off of it. She didn't frame it as a victory. She simply let it be part of her work, the kind of work that doesn't end when the cameras turn off. She gave a lecture months later at a university in D.C. The students asked about confrontation, about winning, about how it felt to break Elon Musk. She corrected them. "I didn't break him," she said. "I asked questions no one else would sit still long enough to hear answered." She closed with a sentence that wasn't for applause. Sometimes the most brutal thing you can do to power is give it space to tell the truth. And she left it there. Elon Musk was different now. Not publicly. Publicly, he was still sharp, still fast, still divisive. But the people closest to him noticed. The difference wasn't in what he said. It was in what he stopped saying. It was in the pause before the tweet that didn't get posted. The silence after a proposal that cut corners. The new habit of walking the floor of his factories without press, without fanfare, and just watching the people building what he imagined. One afternoon, an intern stopped him to ask what he thought the most important thing he'd built was. Elon didn't say SpaceX. He didn't say Tesla. He said, "The moment I didn't defend myself." The intern didn't understand at first, but Elon just smiled and walked on. In a handwritten note tucked inside a folder on his desk, the kind no one else had read, Elon had written something weeks after the interview. It wasn't for release. It wasn't for legacy. It was for memory. It said, "The world doesn't care how fast you build. It cares what's left standing after you do." He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. Pam Bondi kept one photo from the night of the interview. Not from the studio. Not from the broadcast. It was a still frame, printed from a freeze frame taken seconds after the segment ended, just before the credits rolled. Elon had turned slightly away from the camera. Pam had leaned back in her chair. And between them was the kind of silence that only comes after something real has happened. She kept the photo in her drawer. She never showed it. She just looked at it sometimes when the noise got too loud. To remember what it sounds like when someone finally stops running from the cost of what they've built and listens.